Okay. All right. We are live. Hello, everybody. This is John Alexander Reese with The Influencers. This is our evening edition show, 6 o'clock, well, 6:01 p.m., but, we almost made it. And on my influencer show, we usually talk about movies, TV shows, anything concerning the arts and entertainment world. And today I have a special guest. I've had him on here before, back when we were still doing shows in the radio, the radio studio. But now I have him live via Zoom. TT stern-enzi, how you doing, TT?
Pretty good, pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. You know what? I went to the theater yesterday. I took a bold step. Well, actually, I went to the theater last Friday. We saw the Russell Crowe movie Unhinged, and
Okay.
it was definitely entertaining. I will tell you that. But and then I saw New Mutants yesterday, and that was not as entertaining. But it's good to go back to the theater, and I'll actually tell you guys about my theater experience in a little bit. But originally, we're gonna just talk about the shows and movies I've been streaming over the past summer because, as you guys know, theaters have been basically closed for like 5 months due to this COVID-19 pandemic. Production on a lot of TV shows and movies have been shut down and everything. And the big three theater chains, Cinemark, AMC, Regal, they just recently opened their doors, just a couple weeks ago. And in fact, in certain states like in California and New York, theaters are still not allowed to open up. And that's kind of bad news for the box office because, as I learned recently, most of the theaters make their money in New York City. A huge chunk of it, huge chunk of it. It's New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. So just a little tidbit I found out about that a couple weeks ago. So that's why studios have been pushing their movies back and back and back. A lot of movies till 2021. But but before we go into all that, I had to bring up something very somber news. Last night, it was announced that Chadwick Boseman, um, Black Panther himself, also played Jackie Robinson, 42, James Brown, and Get On Up, Thurgood Marshall in the movie Marshall. Unfortunately, he passed away of colon cancer last night at the age of 43. And I know a lot of people took that news very hard, especially due to the fact that no one knew he was sick. So that's probably the most surprising thing at all. And that, he was diagnosed in 2016, and he had been filming all of these movies in between that time, which requires a lot of willpower on his end. And like I said, it's really sad news to hear about that, and definitely a bummer. I feel that like brought the internet together, in unity last night. With all the divisiveness divisiveness going on in this country. I feel that we came together to celebrate his legacy. So TT, what are your thoughts on Chadwick Boseman?
Well, yeah, and I feel like I was probably a little late finding out about it. I did not hear about it last night, so for me, it was waking up this morning, uh, checking my phone. It was one of the first bits of news, and um, again, I mean, it's you can even tell right now. And again, it's I've had a whole day to kind of try to process it, and it's still been tough. I've honestly spent the day not only reading other people's comments, the tweets and the comments from people that worked with him or had the opportunity to spend time with him, or there are a number of journalists who, unfortunately, I'm not among their number, but there are people that I know in the industry who had the opportunity to interview him, and everyone's sharing stories, and we all do that. We all have our stories of people that we've interviewed and the kindnesses that they have bestowed upon us when we've had the opportunity to work with them and speak with them. And to a person, all of the stories and those anecdotes just they speak to the idea that he was just a remarkable person. So it's been tough to watch and read those things. But then, and I just tweeted about this probably about 15 or 20 minutes ago. I got on YouTube and I watched the SNL sketch, Black Jeopardy, that he was on right
Yes.
after Black Panther came
Yes.
out, where you see him with Keenan and the crew there, and he's basically in, he's playing T'Challa
Mm.
on Black Jeopardy, and we are so used to seeing and again really appreciating the power and the gravitas that he had as a performer on screen, but it was just so different and so special to kind of remember the fact that along with all of that gravitas, he was a performer. Was an amazing actor, and the humor that he brought to that character in that moment in that sketch was just incredible, because again, I'm a huge fan of Keenan, and to see them going back and forth during that sketch it kind of warms your heart. So I would tell anyone right now that's watching or listening to this and they are struggling with trying to sort of get through this news and how to deal with it, take a moment, watch that, and again, it really will, it'll lift your spirit. So I get the feeling I will be going back to that YouTube clip quite a bit in the next few weeks, just to kind of, like I said, to kind of help me process it all. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
we have all of those great performances that we can go back and watch. But I totally know that if I'm watching him as James Brown or Jackie Robinson or Thurgood Marshall, I'm at some point going to sit and
Mhm.
well up, because I'm going to realize, wait a minute, this is what we've lost. We've lost a really great performer who, unfortunately, um, even though he was widely respected within the industry, and as critics, we all talked about the power of his performances, he was never even nominated for an Academy Award. But at least for me, it was always kind of like, well, he's going to get nominated sooner or later. It's going to come because he's been so great.
Yeah.
Um, but the reality is, when you think about that now, it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, we shouldn't look at performers and people like that and say, well, we'll get you next time. We'll get you next time.
Yeah.
We've got to start really paying attention to the greats that we have in our midst, in our presence, and rewarding them and acknowledging them while they're here.
Yeah.
Um, it's a shame, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's just a part of the world. So hopefully, what this will do too, again, the fact that he was 43, and again, we all assumed there was going to be so much more that we get from him. Hopefully, this will be a reminder to all of us that you gotta live and appreciate people in this moment right now, because you don't know that they're going to be there later on, or that we're going to be there later on to see what they're going to give us later on. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a very sobering way of looking at it, but again, it should hit us all in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Although it is comforting to know that he did get a SAG award for Best
Hmm.
Cast when Black Panther won the SAG award back in like 2018 or 2019. So he did get
Right.
a SAG award, which is also a very prestigious award. In case people don't know, the SAG awards, they're basically the actors' version of the Oscars, and actors
Hmm.
are the largest branch of the Academy Awards. So at least his peers did recognize him somewhat for all the work he did.
Yes. Yes, definitely true. Definitely true. I'm kind of curious. Again, I know it always kind of cracks me up when I do these shows where I'm not necessarily supposed to be, the person asking the questions, but I got to ask you, um, as we're talking about him, like, what's a key moment for you that kind of stands out from a film or an interview or whatever's out there? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Chadwick Boseman?
You know what? Really, one of the most important things is because, I read, I don't read a whole lot of comics, but I do read some comics. But it's like there's always representation in comic books. Like we have plenty of black superheroes in comic books, Marvel and DC. Like there's Black Panther, there's Falcon over in Marvel. There's Ironheart, which is a black girl named Riri Williams takes up the mantle of Iron Man, what she calls herself Ironheart. And then Miles Morales, he's Spider-Man. He was into the Spider-Verse. And DC, they got Static and stuff and Steel, but we haven't really seen a lot of black superheroes on the big screen. And the black superheroes that we do see, they're either in the supporting roles or they don't have like their own lead film. So to me, when Black Panther came out in 2018, I was just like, wow, this is a Black man leading a $200 million superhero film. And, we would have never seen that 10 years ago. So it just makes me, I smiled when I went to the screening to see Black Panther, to see this, to see this world brought alive, and Chadwick Boseman totally embodied the Black Panther character. And it also helped that, it was a good script, it was a good director, Ryan Coogler, and also you had a really strong performance from Michael B. Jordan, who I think to this day should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but that's a whole nother topic within itself. But
Right.
it was just amazing to see, like, they got this like Black man in the leading role in the superhero movie, because up to that point, it was Black superheroes either in supporting role or just not at all and everything. And I actually read an interesting article the other day when Chadwick Boseman was promoting Black Panther, how they didn't want him to do an African voice, and he fought for that, man, to do an African voice. So he said he just thought that was very important for that character. And I was just like, that is so true. It's really important. And now, thanks to Chadwick Boseman, we are getting more superhero, movies like, Anthony Mackie is doing the Falcon and Winter Soldier on Disney Plus. We got, and even behind the camera too, we got Nia DaCosta directing the upcoming Candyman reboot. She got tapped for Captain Marvel too. And that is amazing news. I mean, I don't think people know how big that is. And, it's just like first of all, a woman getting a chance to direct a big budget action movie is huge. And then on top of that, a Black woman directing a big, superhero $200 million movie, that's amazing. I never thought I would see that for like a very long time. And that's why I have to applaud Marvel for, because, they are leading this way, because, the Black Widow movie, that's directed by a woman, the Eternals movie that have come out, that's directed by an Asian woman. So it's Hollywood is getting, more diverse. It's like one small step at a time, but I just thought that was amazing news. So, because in Hollywood, all we're asking for, especially minorities, we're just asking for representation, because, shocker, people like to see themselves on the screen, so that's all we're asking for. So that's why I love it when we're seeing more diverse voices on the screen and from behind the screen too. So that's why I think Chadwick Boseman's, he definitely left his mark on Hollywood and everything. And although, and it's sad to see him, go at the peak of his career, but, he'll always be remembered for, the Black Panther role, which is, and I could tell he loved doing the Black Panther role. It was countless times he was doing the Wakanda Forever symbol.
Yes.
I know he got tired of that after a while, secretly probably, but still though, it's like, and tell you the truth, if I saw Black Panther when I was a kid, I probably would have been dressed up as Halloween as Black Panther too. So I just think this thing is representation matters. I'm glad Chadwick Boseman, embodied the spirit of Black Panther. So yeah. Okay. Well, moving on. Like I was talking about at the beginning of the show, COVID-19 pandemic really threw a monkey wrench at the summer movie schedule. Like we were supposed to get so many movies, but either they got pushed back all the way to later this year, or they got pushed back to 2021. So people were obviously starved for content. So hence comes Netflix, Hulu, Prime, all the streaming services. They're releasing content of their own. So, I just wanted to bring up, like, what were some of the best streaming movies or TV shows that happened over summer? And I'll let you take it away.
Well, yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, I just, over the last couple of weeks, had the opportunity to kind of discuss this on Fox 19, because I was doing once a week film review for them on Fridays for opening day coverage. But during during COVID-19 quarantine, they reached out to me about 2 weeks in and sort of said, well, yeah, people are going to be home, like you mentioned, they're watching stuff. And they'd like to have some feedback or advice about what to check out. So they were like, well, would you be willing to come on and instead of just once a week, doing it 5 days a week, just talking about what you're watching? And I was
nice.
a little skeptical at first. Yeah, because it was kind of like, well, okay. I mean, I didn't even know how long or how much was going to be available for me to watch.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, if we want to do this, this will give me a chance to go back, watch some shows that I maybe meant to catch back, when they were on, either on network TV or they were streaming titles that I just didn't have a chance to get around to since I focused so much on film. But one of the really interesting things about the whole process is, as a critic, and I see usually anywhere between 300 or maybe 400 movies a year in our market, that seems like a lot.
Yeah.
But in reality, there are sometimes at least twice as many, if not more, films that are being released all around the country and that are hitting those bigger markets that don't necessarily come here, or they don't get the kind of promotion that they get in those other markets. So there's tons of stuff that's out there, and a lot of those titles ended up coming out on video on demand now, since obviously they couldn't hit theaters. And the PR reps were just kind of like, well, let's talk about it because people need something to watch. So I would get the links. I had the opportunity now with 5 days a week. So it was like, okay, sure, I'll talk about the stuff. So it completely opened things up in that way, which means that I have watched an incredible amount of content now, more than I normally would, say, by this time in a normal year. And the great thing is, we're not exactly going to leave Chadwick Boseman just yet, because in terms on the film side, one of the first titles that really popped for me since quarantine was the new Spike Lee film Da 5 Bloods, which was a Netflix title, which was supposed to play in theaters, because Netflix, I think they learned a lot from their approach at the end of last year with the award season, with having The Irishman and The Two Popes and Marriage Story and all of those titles that were great titles with great casts, and they worked with directors of note. So they were already planning to do even more of that in this upcoming, what would have been this upcoming year, which is 2020. And Spike's film was one of those titles, but it actually now has turned out that was the first of their kind of prestige titles that they ended up releasing during quarantine. They released it early, and it's a phenomenal film. I have a hard time, and again, I actually focused on Spike in particular during earlier quarantine coverage, because it was kind of like, well, he's just one of those directors we've kind of taken for granted in a lot of ways. So I went back and looked at a handful of his earlier titles, again, School Days, Malcolm X, Do the Right Thing, She's Gotta Have It. And again, we, as in particular, really focused on Do the Right Thing at the time of the start of the protests right around Memorial Day weekend. And if you go back and you look at his first, say, 6 films, if he had stopped making movies after those first 6 films, that would have been an amazing career.
Yeah,
but he didn't. He kept going. He made more incredible films through the 90s into the early 2000s, so much to the extent that we kind of started to take him for granted, I think, in a lot of ways. And there were a number of titles that were in that stretch that were not necessarily as powerful or as impactful as those early films. So we just kind of like, you kind of forgot about it. And to a certain extent, even though it was out there, you're just like, okay, yeah, this is another Spike Lee joint.
Yeah.
But in the last couple of years now, starting probably with Black Klansman and then definitely now with Da 5 Bloods, it's like he's letting us know, yeah, I'm still here, and I still got a lot of great stuff in me. And one of the really powerful bits of casting that takes place in this new film is Chadwick Boseman in a very, very small but pivotal role. It's, again, the film as a whole is about a group of Black Vietnam vets who, in present time, have decided to go back to Vietnam. They want to get there to go go back and find the remains of their commanding officer, who was played by Chadwick Boseman back in the day, who was killed during his time in service. They want to go back, get his remains, bring them back, but there's also a bit of treasure, if you will. They decide they buried with his remains. They want to get it back and kind of reclaim that bit of their legacy for being over there too.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so fascinating and meaningful about Boseman's portrayal in this film is he is seen, and you recognize in the stories that those surviving Black men have and the experience that they relate with him. He was an iconic kind of figure for them.
Mm.
He was that soldier, that man, that leader that inspired them, made them better soldiers, made them better men, gave them the opportunity to come back and try to live up as best they could to the ideals that he gave them while they were all over there. And I can't imagine a better performer to kind of embody all of that at this point. Like, again, and like I said today, all the stories we're hearing about Chadwick and the power and the grace that he had in supporting and working with people, it was like perfect casting. And we probably didn't pay attention to it. I watched that film and I was kind of like, well, yeah, that's great that they cast him, and I didn't really think about it. But today, knowing that I was going to come on here and be talking about this with you, I was like, wow, that really was Spike and the team that worked on that film. They knew he was the right person for that role. Yeah. And I'm not going to say he was the only person, but it looks like now that was, you couldn't imagine anyone else doing it.
No, yeah, definitely.
So and again, small amount of screen time. He is not the real focus of the story, I would say. If in terms of the other actors that are there, Delroy Lindo is it's the performance that kind of anchors and is very present throughout the film. Yeah. But yeah, it would be great if somewhere down the line, and again, we will have, an award season this year. It will just be extended into 2021.
Right.
But I sincerely hope that when we get to that season, not only will people be talking about Delroy from the Five Bloods, I hope somewhere in the mix there's a chance for Chadwick Boseman to get a little bit of recognition, or people to keep that in mind, that that was a great cast. Yeah. And he was a part of that great cast. So again, like you said, like with Black Panther, maybe there's a SAG award for best cast for the Five Bloods. And again, I'm sure each and every one of them will hold him up as an example to kind of rally around if that happens.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
that would definitely be one of the first titles that kind of pops up for me. And again, like I said, it will be an award season kind of title. The other films that really captured my attention, or at least that have so far, are probably not necessarily Oscar bait kinds of films, even though there may be some great performances or they could be great stories. But it's just what has happened for me, especially with the titles that I chose. They were just films that have come out during quarantine that they felt really personal.
Right.
In a lot of ways, and they kind of reach you when you're kind of sitting at home and you're not able to get out as much and do the things you'd want to do, like have summer vacations and go out and eat and walk around your cities. For instance, Miss Juneteenth was another title that for me really popped. It's an indie film, and it actually came out around Juneteenth, which was another kind of pivotal period that we got to experience kind of at home during this year during quarantine. But Nicole Beharie plays a woman in Texas who had the opportunity to compete when she was in high school in a Miss Juneteenth pageant in Texas in her hometown, and she ended up winning the pageant. And as part of the system and the way the pageant system works, she was supposed to get access to have funds to go to college, get a scholarship, and kind of use that as a springboard to move off into her life. But unfortunately, life intervened. She got pregnant. She had a child out of wedlock pretty early. Didn't really have the opportunity to do those things, but she did what she had to do. She's worked hard. She's raising her daughter, and now her daughter is old enough to compete in the pageant. And there's this tension between the two of them, because as a mother and a winner of the pageant, she's trying to push and force her daughter to be able to do something and succeed in a way that she feels that she wasn't able to.
Mm.
And the daughter, and again, it's not completely averse to this idea, but she doesn't really want to do things the way that her mother did. And the great thing about the film and the performance is Nicole Beharie, like I said, she embodies all of the striving and the struggle and the frustration of her character as a mother and a woman who didn't have the opportunity to kind of fulfill the promise of her own life and experiences.
Right.
But you also get the sense that, again, she's still very proud of who she is. She's not locked in a sense of looking at herself and feeling bad about what happened necessarily, because she just understands this is life and I got to keep pushing through.
Right.
So she deals with the struggle. She does what she has to do. And again, it's in those moments and that performance and the story as a whole kind of come together, and it worked for me. And I was just like, yeah, maybe an Independent Spirit Award kind of film, because again, it's a smaller title.
Mm-hmm.
She's great in it. I hope she has the opportunity to get that. But like I said, even if she doesn't, it's one of those films that, I think people should really kind of latch onto and sort of say, well, yeah, if I need to see someone persevere and struggle and keep going, especially during a time like this,
Mm-hmm.
sit back and watch Miss Juneteenth, and it'll definitely give you a little bit of a kick and some inspiration to keep going too. Mm-hmm. So that would be maybe the second title for me during this time. Trying to figure out how much time we have as I'm going through this.
Well, technically we have an hour, so
okay.
So we can keep on going.
Okay.
I mean,
well, again,
better,
then
right?
if we're gonna do that, then I'm gonna switch up a little bit, because I've given you a couple of kind of heavy titles so far.
Okay, yeah.
A nice change of pace. The Amazon Prime, or again Prime Video release, The Vast of Night is an interesting one for people that haven't had the chance to see it. Unlike the other two, this one is definitely more of a almost sci-fi thrillerish kind of film. Takes place in a small town in the Midwest, or the Southwest, I'd say, in a different time period. Radio is king. You have a community that is caught up in high school football and the love of the sport and the value, the old American values of all of that. And there's a bit of a conspiracy or a question of what's going on, and the possibility of maybe even an alien invasion. So there are UFOs, and people are finding out about this. And there's a young woman who works for the phone system, the phone company in the small town. She works the switchboard, handling all this stuff. And again, she's a young woman in high school, but she's really smart, really quick. She hooks up with a radio disc jockey who's covering the game. They're starting to hear and sense that there are things going on in the community that no one else is aware of. And they start trying to track it all down in the vast of the night. It's like I said, it's not quite pushing its way into horror, but it's definitely sci-fi and a thriller. But it's done in such a really interesting, quiet kind of way, in a small, intimate way. There are not a lot of special effects. There are no creatures to speak of. It's a lot of dialogue. But again, the way that it works, it grips you and it keeps you and it pulls you in. If you're hearing these stories and people are talking about it, you get the sense of the conspiracies that are going on maybe behind the scenes. And as it all plays out, you find yourself, as you're watching this film, leaning in a little closer. As you're listening. And again, most people are probably like me when they're doing this stuff. I'm watching and talking about things. I have my headphones on, and as I was watching the movie, I caught myself kind of leaning into it too. Like, okay, wait a minute, am I hearing everything, or what's going on, or I got to find out more about this. And again, the story pulls you in, and the execution on that level is phenomenal. And that's the sign that that you're in the hands of a good storyteller. who doesn't have a lot of money and all the resources and all that kind of stuff, but they can still hook you in.
Right.
There have been a lot of really great horror films that have come out during this phase too. Because horror is one of those genres that, there's a lot of creativity and a lot of passion from, the filmmakers and the storytellers that are working in that genre, but they're also kind of able to make a lot more with a lot less.
Right.
And you get to see that and you feel that. But like I said, this one in particular, not quite true horror, but again, it definitely is horror adjacent, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And it's a great title that'll get under your skin, and that's the big thing. If it gets under your skin, they've done their job.
Yeah. That's kind of horror, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I would hit you with that. I'm going to go to the documentary side because there are technically, and I did this when I talked about this on TV, there are technically 2 docs that have really captured my attention so far up to this point. The big title is, again, kind of a heavy title because it's the John Lewis documentary, Good Trouble. We just lost him.
Yeah.
And his example is, again, sort of such a powerful kind of example too, in a much different way to a certain extent than Chadwick Boseman, because again, this was real life, and again, the civil rights era struggles, his time in Congress, and doing everything that he could to change the system, to give people opportunities, to make sure that everyone had access to the American dream and the rights and privileges of being in this country. And the idea, like I said, of the title, he basically always talked about that point that, again, if you're going to get out there and you're going to protest and fight for things, you're going to have to get into trouble. But that's, again, that's the good trouble that you can do to try to make a difference, to try to change things. And that documentary, the filmmakers behind it were able to really incorporate him into it, to let him see and experience elements of his life that he may have forgotten about. But also show the line from him to politicians and activists today, and there's a great moment in the film where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is interviewed, and she mentions that, for all she's done and for the profile that she's gained from being in the House of Representatives right now, just at the start of her career, she might not be where she is right now, and she might not be the person that she is if she hadn't had his example.
No. Wow.
And it lets you know that she's taken that to heart and is recognizing that, he did so much during his lifetime, and she's just starting, and she's kind of looking at it, kind of thinking, well, I got a long way to go to, and there's an awful lot that hopefully I'll be able to accomplish, and a lot that I'll be able to do to help people along the way. So that film does it, and it does it with a good and open heart. Again, it takes that very serious subject matter, but has presented it in a way that it's accessible and it's inviting for people. It brings people into the issues in a relatable kind of way, because he was such an open man as well.
Right.
So I love that film. And again, that's sort of the big picture. But then there was another doc, which was much smaller, called Jack and Yaya. Smaller film. PR team reached out to me, and I was excited to have the chance to catch up and talk about that one after I saw it, because it looks at a set of friends, kids who've known each other since they were probably 3 or 4 or 5 years old. It takes place in the Northeast. I think they lived in Boston, if I remember correctly. But they lived next door to each other. They met when their families moved in and became friends, and they've gone through this journey together. And it's a fascinating journey because of these 2 characters and these 2 people. They were both transgender.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
One male, one female, but they were both recognized pretty early on in each other that they were born in the wrong bodies and with the wrong gender identity.
Wow.
And they recognized it, and that was the foundation of their friendship, that kinship and that understanding of, you can be who you need to be around me, and I can be who I need to be around you. And we'll help each other make sure that everyone else comes to understand who we are. And how we want to present ourselves to the world. And they have gone through this together, and their friendship has continued and evolved, and they've pushed each other. And again, it's one of those films, it's about 95 minutes long, but you're watching it and you see them together. And it reminds you probably of, at least it did for me, it reminded me of the friends that I grew up with, that I have known since I was a kid, and what we did for each other, how close we were, how close we still are. And to see and to know that there are people, again, that have those kinds of connections like that, especially when you're talking about, again, a larger issue. And again, the film doesn't go out of its way to kind of paint this as really a story about the transgender community. It's a story about these two people,
right,
who happen to both be transgender,
and
the relationship and the love that they have for each other. And that's it. It's so, again, it's that personal kind of story that if you watch it, you get into it, you think about it, it will make you think about the issue. But again, it will make you think about the issue because it becomes a personal thing for you. It's not about, oh, I've got to get into the sloganeering of what's going on or anything like that. It's just, I'm just watching some people experience their life, and I want to spend more time with them. And that was it. That was exactly it for me. I watched that film, and by the time it was over, I was kind of like, wow, I wish I could spend more time with these people. There was nothing at all that was necessarily common about us. We were not the same age. We weren't from the same part of the country, but they were people that you felt like you knew.
Right.
And again, that's a sign of a great film that can do that for you, bring you into someone else's experience, make it relatable, make it personal for you, so that you walk away from it and those people stay with you. So that is, again, it's probably these stories and the way that I'm talking about them now, you'll see that that's a huge part of why I'm a critic and why I love film, because film does that for you. It presents you opportunities to, as you mentioned, talking about representation early on with Chadwick Boseman. That representation leads to, again, and we talk about it a lot now, and we're using the different term of intersectionality, but it is through that intersection of experiences and realities that we all go through that we can kind of find the commonality of our experiences. And if, as a Black man, I can watch that story and say, yeah, I relate to these two people who are dealing with a different kind of struggle. I want to see and relate and connect to their struggle and connect that to my struggle.
Right.
The John Lewis doc does that. And again, like I said, you had John Lewis is a Black man who's now inspiring, a woman who's in Congress now, who's from New York and Hispanic and doesn't necessarily look or have the same kind of experience that he had as a young man growing up. But again, there's that connection between the two of them. We see stories have the power to do that for us, to connect us all. And hopefully it's through those connections that we all kind of come together and see if there are ways that we can affect some real change in the world that we see and know needs that change. So yeah, those are some of the films so far that have really kind of grabbed me. I'm kind of curious. I got like I said, I like to kind of turn things back on you for a little bit. Like, what have you seen? Because you've probably seen some different things that I'm like, maybe I need to check out some of what you've seen. So do you have a title or two for me?
Yeah, I do have a couple of titles. Like I said at the like I was saying towards the beginning of the show, I ventured out to the theater because because I don't get me wrong, I love watching streaming movies and everything, especially on Netflix, but I gotta be brutally honest with Netflix. They kind of have more misses than hits. They're definitely more of the quantity over quality game over at Netflix. And I say this as a person who loves Netflix, has had Netflix for years, but like I said, but when they get it right, like with the Five Bloods and everything, and The Irishman and Roma, but for every good movie, there's probably about 10 forgettable ones, unfortunately.
Right.
But like I said, there is actually one movie that I'm thinking off the top of my head, and it's on HBO Max, the new streaming service that Warner Brothers put out
Hmm.
about a year ago. It's called An American Pickle, and that's
Haven't
the
seen it yet.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Seth Rogen movie, and basically a brief synopsis of the movie. Seth Rogen, he actually plays two roles in this movie. He plays a Jewish immigrant, and he leaves his country with his wife in the 1920s, and gets a job at a pickle factory. And one day he falls into a vat of pickles, and the pickle brand preserves him for 100 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and so he wakes up in modern day New York, and he meets his great grandson, who is also played by Seth Rogen. And basically, it's one of those fish out of water stories, and there's also emphasis on religion,
Hmm.
family, and of course, it's a Seth Rogen movie, so it's got some jokes in there. But while it's not the funniest Seth Rogen movie I've ever seen, this is really one of the first Seth Rogen movies where he's really impressed me as an actor. It's like
Okay.
I think he could easily make that switch to dramatic roles if he wanted to, because like I said, a lot of actors like Tom Hanks and Jim Carrey and the late Robin Williams, while they were fantastic comedic actors, they were also, great, dramatic actors as well. And like I said, Seth Rogen really had a great performance in American Pickle. And like I said, it had and it had a lot of heart to it too, which I wasn't expecting. So, but
Okay.
if you're expecting a really raunchy film, this is not it. This is more of a kind of a subtle film. And like I said, it's a good streaming film. I wouldn't have seen it at theaters, but like I said, if you have HBO Max, you need
Hmm.
something to watch on the streaming service. And also, I gotta say real quick about HBO Max, um, it's a really good streaming service in my opinion, and not
Yeah,
just
I've been enjoying it too. I really have. So yeah.
yeah, because the
Hmm.
just the library is amazing.
Hmm.
Turner Classic Movies library. They got the Studio Ghibli collection on there,
Yeah.
and it's great. It's costly though. $14.99 a month. It's costly, but like I said, I think it's a personally a really good streaming service. Right now, I think it's even better than Disney Plus. So
Wow. Okay.
I would definitely check
Well,
it out.
that's interesting because again, I feel like I'm about to be a shill for them for a second because yeah, you're right about the cost, but I will say that as as an AT&T phone service user, I get HBO Max as part of my phone coverage, so
Oh
I've got it for
wow!
free. And again, that's interesting because that's what we're seeing now with a lot of the streaming services. There are ways and opportunities to kind of package your streaming options to see if there are ways to kind of create your own a la carte kind of platform to be able to watch as much as you possibly
Hmm.
can. So yeah, that's definitely one of the ways that I've been able to take advantage of it.
Yeah,
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 because again, part of that deal is as a critic, I usually get streaming links for even like the Disney Plus stuff. I don't have Disney Plus as a streaming service, but I
mm,
get to watch their content because they send it to me in advance. So I don't always think about, well, yeah, if I had to pay for this, what would this look like? Or
yeah,
how do people package these things together to make sure that they're going to get everything that they want? So
yeah,
it does feel good to be able to tell people that, yes,
yeah,
unfortunately, HBO Max costs this much, but you have,
yeah,
if you have AT&T, you can get it. And
yeah,
that'll help cut some of that down because that's the struggle that we all have in terms of talking about different as we're moving away from cable to try to figure this out. That's a real issue.
yeah, definitely.
So like I said, I don't want to feel like an HBO shill, but
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
you
Yeah,
gotta think about those things because that's definitely important, especially during a time like this.
yeah,
Because again, we are at home, we don't have unlimited resources to devote to all of these streaming services, so you have to kind of pick and choose what you're doing. But I'm actually also curious as part of the conversation with you because you've mentioned now that you've been out to theaters twice,
hmm
and one of the struggles that I have had as a critic around all of this is the idea that I haven't been to a theater since early March.
Yeah.
Because again, the Russell Crowe film that you mentioned that you saw last week, I got the opportunity to stream that and interview the director, so I didn't
Oh, wow.
have to leave the comfort of my home to
Yeah.
experience that. But the New Mutants is an interesting difference for me because Disney did not offer that up for critics, so there were no streaming links for that or anything, so that we could cover it beforehand. So they were forcing us to go see it, and a lot of critics, and I'm one of them, we are, if you're not going out to theaters, I'm not covering that film.
Yeah.
And because I'm not feeling comfortable enough just because of my family and our situation. It's like, I'm not going to check that out. But I'm not, it doesn't bother me that other people are going to see it. But it does bother me that as a critic that in the last couple of weeks, as theaters have opened up more, I've had to talk about the idea that, I saw this film and I might like it or I might not like it, but I'm going to tell you about it. And then you're going to have to make a decision as to whether you're going to want to go out and see it. And it feels to me, to a certain extent, like I'm not just telling people to see a movie. I'm telling people to potentially go put themselves in a situation that they may not be comfortable with to go see a movie.
Yeah. And
so it's,
no, and I completely understand that too. I was actually kind of complaining about that. I was talking about with a couple of people on Twitter, and it kind of bothers me that how I think I know the studios have to make money and everything. That's understandable. But I really think, especially during this time, during this pandemic, they should really switch to day and date releases. And I know the theaters won't be happy about that, obviously, because theaters need to make money, because, it's like the theaters, I've heard the movie theaters, they've been through a really rough time. Like AMC was was filing bankruptcy. I know around here, they temporarily closed the Kenwood Theater, so so I know theaters are having a really rough time and everything, but I also think it's studio's responsibility. Studios shouldn't say, like, they should give the consumer of choice. You shouldn't risk your life to go to a theater. Like for example, like Bill and Ted Face the Music, I think they did the right thing. You can go to this theater to see Bill and Ted, but if you don't want to go to the theater, you can rent Bill and Ted at home for I think it's like $20.
Right.
And like I said, I wouldn't advise this to be a long-term strategy, obviously, but I think this is obviously this is exemption, this is exception. And I really think you should give people the choice.
Right.
I really think so.
That's a really good point. It's been interesting to kind of watch this because I've been able to keep track and participate in, or really not participate, but just to listen in to, there's a group, Art House Convergence, that looks at sort of the art house theater market and how they've been able to handle things during quarantine. And one of the fascinating things that has happened, the smaller film distributors have actually worked with smaller art houses to say, okay, well, here's the deal. You guys are closed and are dealing with the same issue too, but we also know that once this is over, these small films are going to need those art house homes and theaters to play these titles. So what they've done during quarantine is they've worked with the art houses to say, okay, we ordinarily have a different kind of split with you in terms of we'll license our films to you, but we take the lion's share of that money. You make your money on the concessions. During quarantine, they have said, okay, we'll license this to you. We'll give you a 50-50 split. So if, say, for instance, in this market, if you would ordinarily go to the Esquire or Marymount to see an independent film, while they were initially closed, you could still go to that site to find out about what would have been a new release in their theater. And if you wanted to see it, your ticket price, if you bought it, that would be split either 50-50 or 60-40. There's a much more comparable, even kind of split between the distributor and the theater, because that gives the theater an opportunity to make some money. so that they can hopefully pay their bills, maybe figure out how to support their employees along the way so that, again, they can make it through this time and be able to move on from there. So independent distributors did that, which was a really important thing. Studios are, again, struggling with, the day and date kind of questions. I wish more of them had been a little more proactive in how they handle that, because, again, those are the kinds of things that are even more important, like you said, with the AMCs and the bigger theater chains, because they have even more in terms of costs that they have to deal with. They've got, more screens, bigger spaces, bigger rents to pay, and to not have anything coming in at all was going to be a problem, and it was going to be tough. And again, at some point, we are going to get through this, and it's going to be a shame to think that a lot of those bigger chains are going to they're going to struggle, and especially even now that they're open, when you can only open at 30 or 40% capacity, that's still not enough to pay the bills either. And we will be in that process for a long time. So it's one of those things that you kind of look at and you kind of wish that, the bigger studios and the bigger chains could follow the model and the example set on the independent and the art house side. Because at the end of the day, both of them know that they need to be there. They need to be able to do what they need to do. And it ultimately is about us. Because we're the people going to see those films, paying for tickets, buying the concessions, keeping the industry going. So if you find ways to keep us invested in it, then that's what's going to help keep everybody in business. And you have to think that way. And again, it's sad that they haven't, because it has then turned things onto the streaming services, who, like I said, if you're Amazon and Netflix in particular, you are already kind of struggling with, well, do I put my films in theaters or do I just stick with the streaming? You were ready for streaming. You didn't have to like Netflix didn't have to do a whole lot to change things up. They've been able to keep making money, keep pumping out stories, keep people engaged. So the whole industry, everybody kind of needs to sit down and think through those kinds of things to help figure out how do you maintain and keep this entire system afloat for 2021 and beyond. But we'll see how they handle it. It'll be interesting. It really will as we move forward. It will certainly
be interesting. And we're going to try to wrap up here in a little bit. But real quick, I wanted to ask you, did Warner Brothers send you a screening link for Tenet? Or
no, they are not doing that for Tenet at all.
Ooh, okay.
That's one of those titles that, again, I am not going to see anytime soon. I've been watching and reading, because, again, one of the things that has happened during quarantine is you see a lot more critics whose papers have maybe been, they've been furloughed for their papers, or weren't necessarily in the position that I've been in with Fox 19 to have the opportunity to continue covering things on, especially for me now, on a daily basis. People have gone and they started using Zoom or, doing video reviews of their own and setting up channels on YouTube and things like that. So I've been reading and watching the reviews that have popped up that way. Which means that, again, and I was always one of those people who kept up with the reviews anyway. So this is just an opportunity and a way for me to kind of keep connected. But I'm a little sad that I'm probably not going to get the opportunity to see that film for myself. I can always split my head sort of and say, well, I've read someone's review, but I'm still going to be able to go in and see it for myself and develop my own opinion about it. And it's going to be a long time, especially in the case of Tenet, before I'm able to get around to that. But
because Christopher Nolan demands that to be seen in the theater. So while I agree with that, at the same time, this is not the time for that conversation.
Right.
Okay, but unfortunately, we have to wrap it up here. But thank you so much, TT, for coming on to the Influencer Show. I greatly appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
You have any website links or social media that people can follow you on?
You can follow me on Twitter at TT stern-enzi, all, no hyphen in between the stern and enzi, but just all together. And I also have my blog, terrencetodd.com, TERRENCETODD. That's what the TT stands for in my name. And I archive everything there. So again, that's literally, you'd have the chance to go back and see every video clip I've done from Fox 19 for the last 4 or 5 months. And then also all of my writings and everything from Dayton City Paper and City Beat, and even the earlier Fox 19 clips, they're all there. So, if you want to take the time to kind of do some exploring, find some titles that you might want to check out that you missed when they were out, or, just to hear another opinion about what I've seen and what's out there, the opportunities there, kind of check into it, and hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions or comments, or you want to start a conversation. Because I love, as you can tell here, I love talking about movies.
Oh yeah.
I'll do it no matter what. So feel free to open up the conversation. And thank you for giving me the chance to reach out to people in this way.
No problem. Movies are important. They always will be. But anyway, next week on the Influencer Show, we got Morgan A. Owens of the Morgan A. Owens brand, and we got Nyla Edwards, and they're going to talk about the Black Women's Author Book Fair. And that's going to be at 11 a.m. next Saturday. So make sure everyone checks that out. And also, make sure to follow Cincinnati Herald on Facebook. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, YouTube, at the Herald TV. We're also on LinkedIn. And make sure all the influencer shows, in addition to being on Facebook, will also be on YouTube, everyone. So basically, everyone, just like I said on my previous show, make sure you wear a mask so we can get through this pandemic even faster. All right. Thanks for watching, and everyone have a good day.